Hello, welcome to the August 4th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon not be possible with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all the questions that are asked chronologically in order so that we'll get through all the questions. But if you don't get an immediate response to your questions, if we could avoid asking the question repeatedly, that would be appreciated so we get through more questions. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. So if you want, and that will be with timestamps, you could easily navigate to a particular topic. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. Neither of them are Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. We want to extend our thanks to them, and we'll give extra gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information that's available for the Steinberg community. So if you want to download templates, links, or presets, links for tutorials, a lot of wonderful resources there. So once again, my name is Greg Undo, and I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live or watching it on the replay, please feel free to tell us who you are and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we can go ahead and get started. All right, so we see Klaus joining from Malmo, Sweden. We see Jazz Dude on. We see Stefan Larsson, also from Sweden. Adam Langford joining from Bedfordshire in the UK. We have Rude Paz joining from Amsterdam area. Jazz Dude is sharing a link, so if you are a Hallian user, there's updates for Hallian, a free update for 7.5, kind of celebrating the 25th anniversary of Hallian. And there is also a Hallian Sonic update as well. So if you check out your Steinberg download assistant, you should see the updates there. Note that there's also, kind of in celebration of 25 years of Hallian, there's a number of virtual instruments that are currently on sale, so check those out. We have VS Terra Nova also joining from Amsterdam. See Benny from Sweden joining. So we have a question from Rude Paz. Says the 7.5 update looks great. Do you need an Osmos keyboard to use it? So one of the new things with Hallian 7.5 is MIDI 2.0 with MPE support. So you don't need to use an Osmos keyboard. There's other keyboards that will do like the MPE functionality. Rolly has keyboards that do that. But if you want to do, most typical controller keyboards don't have MPE as part of the controller, so that's why you may have seen it in some of the promotional videos, because the Osmos controller will allow you to kind of bend an individual note and take the individual notes, and at that point have like independent aftertouch so that you can be more expressive with your MIDI. Great. Wonderful to see Jazz Dude on, checking in. All right, we see Danny B saying, hey, buddy. So thanks for being on and being part of the community today. All right, so we see question, please, how can I install Cubase on a MacBook Air 2017. So, when you install Cubase, so there isn't a USB-E licenser. I'm not sure which operating system that you're running, but all you'd have to do is when you purchase Cubase, you would get an activation code. That activation code would be entered into, you would download the Steinberg Download Assistant. From the Steinberg Download Assistant, you would enter in your code. So you'd redeem your code up here in the upper left-hand side. So you'd paste that particular code. At that point, you would see like the current version of Cubase is Cubase Pro 15. Now your Cubase Pro 15, that license will also work for Cubase Pro 14, 13, and 12. So if, depending on your operating system, if your operating system is too old, even if you purchase Cubase 15, that license will still work all the way back to Cubase Pro 12. Versions before that required the USB-E licenser, and that can no longer be activated as it has been phased out. So just, so once you have that, then you could authorize it to run it on your Mac. This Ninja Scare just says, can we implement a note repeat in a drum machine? I believe that would be a great, allow it to really operate like a drum machine. Always a pleasure. Cubase is the best. I'll pass it along as kind of a feature request. Currently, there isn't a note repeat in the drum machine. Now, the drum machine itself doesn't really have, so if we're starting off with our drum parts here, so say I come over here to my drum machine, do this particular track, so if we were something out of the way here, so so now if I want to, so once, so there isn't necessarily repeat here, but you could, just go into like the editor for the drum machine. So if we have just a blank part here, we could now just come over here and kind of program in, and it's very easy to kind of program in repeats. Now if you have the full version of Groove Agent, so we'll open up an instance. This isn't in the Groove Agent SE, but in the full version of Groove Agent, you can come over here and just say, okay, I want to right, so once we're in the full Groove Agent, there is going to be a performance. So once we come over here, we could go to the performance mode, and now we could just come over and I'll just learn this particular, say, okay, I want this to be, and I'll just hit a note here, and we could capture that particular note. All right, so now as I come over here, I can so at this point, I could just program the particular rhythms and trigger it from, so as I play a key. So you could do note repeats kind of in the full version of Groove Agent. Also, some of the things that you could do, if we want to just use, let's say, our drum machine sounds, and if we have it just like a snare on its own particular track, we could also come over to the MIDI inserts, and there's a MIDI echo plugin. And when we do this, we could just say, okay, I want to make this 30-second notes. So that could be used as another way of getting note repeats on a particular track as well. So you could automate turning on and off the MIDI echo plugin. Great. And you may want to check to see if Groove Agent is currently on sale with the current promotion. I'm not sure if it is or not. Worth looking into. All right, so we see from I am in drop. Just says, I know there's a VST sale right now. Is there any chance there will be a Steinberg summer sale soon? So usually Steinberg has, sales promotions going on every month. So currently it is with the VST instruments for the 25th anniversary of VST instruments with Hallian, or 25th anniversary of Hallian. But summer is still, 6 more weeks of summer. So there's a lot of time left still in summer. I had some questions I missed. Okay, so we see Uno Momento joining from Finland, Michael Graybill from Dallas. We see Don M. from Fresno, California. See Adam Langford says he's a proud new Hallian user today. His wallet is suffering. Got a good deal on it. All right, so we have Obed Agayenem Boteng joining us from Ghana. Thanks for being a part of the community. And we have Tim K, Tim K joining from Zeist, Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cats Steven, Stella, and other pets are nearby. Memento wants people to whack the like button. John Barry is joining from South Devon, England. It's great to see you on the Zoom meetup last week. Fascinating discussion. All right, from Track Quest Music from North Georgia. Hi, Greg. On the punch kit for Groove Agent, D sharp does not work, at least for me. Also, I noticed a few other kits, the snare does not work also. Great, so let's try. Let me load up the punch kit. So it looks like there's no actual sample that's assigned to that. So, not every, as we kind of go through different kits here. So let's say, but it looks like I'll just load up a different kit here. Take a quick look. Say we go to our Studio SE kit. So we'll see that, we have claps. So with the kit, they may not have sampled claps in the punch kit. So when we come over again to punch kit, they just didn't sample hand claps with it, which is usually what's on, because it's probably just the kit itself and not the hand clap of the drummer. So that's why you probably don't see D sharp 1 working. And it says also I've noticed a few other kits, the snare does not work also. So if you have like a list of kits where the snare isn't working for you, please feel free to send me a list to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And I'd be happy to kind of investigate it further for you, or if you want to mention some in the live stream, some specific kits that you've noticed, just mention it in the live stream so I don't have to look through like 100 drum kits for try to find one snare isn't working. Great to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. All right, so we have Greg R4C saying hi to everyone. All right, so Greg R4C just says, hi, Greg, how do you keep phase cancellation to a minimum for 3 different kicks and a bass sample in mono? Okay, so that's good. I have a, just a quick, I have a project that has 3 kick drums I could use. So let's come over here, open this up. Project my friend Fred Corey did. Speaking with about an hour or so ago. All right, so here we're going to have 3 kick drum mics. So we have a sub kick, a kick, and the 414. So if we want to listen to all these. All right, so let's go ahead and just isolate our kicks. All right, so let's say I have 2 kicks going on here. So one of the things that you could do is actually on the particular track, so, you know, you could often look at it visually and see, okay, when we look at this, you know, we look at the waveforms. This is like a really easy way to determine. So you could see kind of when the waveform is going up on one particular track and maybe it's going in the opposite direction. So that would indicate that those particular tracks are out of phase. So let's say while I'm playing this, I'm going to take this one track, my bottom track here, and I'm going to invert the phase. And here how it gets weaker. It's not kind of augmenting. And we can see that visually as well. So when we come over to look at our kick, we see that when we invert the phase, that this, when we stop it and we zoom in on the amplitude of the waveform, where this track is going down, this one is going up. So you could just invert the phase right there. And now if it is going to be in something like Groove Agent, where maybe we have samples. So, you know, if I come over, let's go to a different kit here, and I'm just going to load in like some 3 samples from our project here. Turn my snap off. I'll just say, okay. Say I want these 3 samples. I'm going to drag them to a pad. Okay, so now when we come over here, if we were listening to, so as we go to different velocity levels, let's say if I want to come over here and we choose just to layer these 3 kicks. But at this point, if we go to within the particular drum kit itself, so if we go here to, let me see where, within the amplifier section of Groove Agent, you have an invert phase. So you could invert the phase on, you know, one particular sample or not. So at this point, You could choose to invert the phase with inside of Groove Agent, but often just kind of looking at it visually will give you a good indication. So, most engineers, when they're testing the mics, they will do a quick recording just to look at the phase relationship. So as you can see here, this is a good example of, the 3 kick drums being in phase with each other. So as you work with that, and so again, if you just take the one, you could invert the phase. So we could do it directly on the event, and that will change kind of the channel. Or if we open up the channel inspector, like on the mixer, we could go to our pre-section, and we could invert the phase here. So we don't see that visually, but we could just do that on a track. So if you want to just, if you have suspicions on 2 tracks that are kind of you think might be causing phase problems, just go to the lower, you could go to the pre-section of the channel and just turn the phase on and off and see how that sounds. So again, if we're playing like these kicks, we could try to invert the phase. See if it sounds weaker or not. So let's say if we go to this track, so you hear how that sounds weaker, has less impact. It's because it's so that's how I would kind of look for phase. And you could do the same with a bass part as well. And some people I know, may just also take tracks, another popular technique with DAWs, like let's say, your mics are at different distances. So if you turn the snap off by hitting the letter J, so this icon here, you could also just come over here and just slightly move the event. So let's say if I want to switch this to seconds, I could just choose to move this event in time. And if you're doing with phase, you may want to go down to samples. So you can say, okay, I want this to start, X number of samples earlier or later. You could adjust kind of the timing position of the files on the timeline as well. Right, so we see TrackQuest Music wants people to smack the like. Right, so we see Don M, who's wondering why having files, it didn't make any difference when he was listening to them on headphones. I think it was importing files from Pro Tools. When he panned, everything sounded it was in the center, or it wasn't. If the panning wasn't making sense, so it ends up it was his cable adapter for his headphones. So always a fun thing to figure out. Glad you've got it sorted. All right, so we see Roland Stuff joining from the south coast of England. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Soren joining from Sweden. All right, so we see from Soren says, Greg, it's troubling that the antivirus blocks Steinberg setup files as virus, malware bytes, false positive. Hopefully it disappears soon. Right now I switch off antivirus and then install from the manager. Yeah, so I haven't had any problems with any of my antivirus software. And we see that Adam Langford says he has no issues with AVG. All right, so we see Matt Elston joining from London. Thanks for being part of the live stream today. All right, so we see Paul Curve 6867 asks, "Hi Greg, how to snap MIDI to bar when recording?" All right, so we have few questions. So let's snap our MIDI to the bar when recording. I believe that this is a preference, so we will come over. Okay, so let's say I'm going to start on beat 2. All right, so I believe that there's a preference for this. So if we go to your preferences or settings, and we come over to, I think it's going to be under record MIDI, snap MIDI parts to bars. So if that is turned on, so I'm going to turn that off for now, and we'll hit OK. So as I go to record, let's go to the right channel. Great, so I'm going to start. Great, so as I record. Right, so once that is turned off, it will just record exactly where I start to record. So I'm going to undo that. Let's enable that preference again. So you may see it under preferences, under your edit menu on Windows, and under the Cubase menu on Mac OS. So again, snap MIDI parts to bars. So when I hit apply, I can come right here. And I'm going to start on beat 2 again. So record. And even if I stopped before the measure 21 completed, we see that now my MIDI event is going to start at the beginning of a bar and end at the end of a bar. Right. It says sometimes I duplicate a bar of MIDI. At the repeat, the first chord is missing. Thanks. So sometimes when you do this, a lot of times you may have put on a metronome here. All right, so let's say I want to duplicate this bar, right? Sometimes, depending, let's see what happens here. Right. So sometimes what can happen is if we're duplicating a particular measure here, and let's say that this bar, where these notes maybe started before the measure started. So Cubase, like if you record just slightly ahead of the beat. Right, so when we look at this, we can see that these 3 notes are now slightly ahead of the beat. Let me just zoom in here. All right, so I want these notes. I'm going to turn my snap off. All right. So if you run into a scenario where it's like, okay, I want to duplicate this, if the initial bars are, in the previous part, it may not duplicate, but I think there is a preference to help with this as well. So sometimes, the notes when you duplicate may be starting in a previous part. But I think Cubase does have a preference to help with this scenario. So let's say if we're editing MIDI, yeah, so we could have right here where you could say how many ticks to extend playback range notes. So, so just make sure that your actual, I think that's the preference, but make sure that your actual events are are probably starting in the, before the measure that you're duplicating. That would be my guess. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music, says Greg using the punch kit, try the preset Petite Racer and try the MIDI keys to make the yellow snares on the left work. Over. Thanks for. Our Petite Racer. Okay. Right, any MIDI keys to make the yellow snare on the left work. Okay. All right, so this is D0, so let me go down. Zero. D0. Okay, so let me just make sure make sure I'm in the right octave. Start with. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my MIDI monitor. Okay, so I'm on D0. All right, so in this case, if you wanted to, trigger that particular one, what I would do is some of these notes are probably going to be also utilized to trigger patterns. So I would just click right here and say, okay, I want on MIDI channel 2 the patterns. So now once I've set that up, because you could have MIDI notes that are overlapping with patterns. So if you have like an extended kit, so now MIDI channel 2, and I click on this icon, so you make sure that you have the player come right over here, and then set the patterns to MIDI channel 2 instead of Omni, and then I could see that when I go to my kit, that when I play, I could have, and if I want to trigger this snare. But if I go to my player and I set this to MIDI channel 1, let's say, now it doesn't seem to play, but what it's doing is it's triggering this pattern. So I'm going to just tell the patterns to go on MIDI channel 2. So with smaller kits, you don't run into this. So now when I hit D0, I trigger that, C1, D1. So try just, again, to go to the player mode in Groove Agent, and you could toggle back and forth by hitting the letter E on your computer keyboard. Go to this little icon and assign a different MIDI channel to the player. So let me know if that helps you, TrackQuest Music. Right, so we see from Greg R4C says, Greg, I've not rendered the tracks to WAV files. Should I do that? Let me just make sure it's what I'm thinking of. It's back with our phase. Okay, yeah, so with phase, so if you haven't rendered it, you don't have to render it as audio. What you So if you don't have it rendered as audio within a particular instrument, I would just come over here, and if you go again to the pre area on the channel, just try to come over here and adjust the phase. You could also do that directly from, if we come over here, let's right click and we could set up sections. You could have the pre section just here on the inspector, and now you could adjust the phase right there as well. So you don't have to render it as audio. If you have it recorded as audio, you could, use the menu entry to invert the phase, but you could invert the polarity here as well, just on the channel strip. Do it there, or do it on the channel in the pre area once you have the EQ enabled. We see from Greg R4C says, thanks for the info. Really appreciate it. It was 20 tracks in total. We have David Grunewalder official saying hi. Thanks for joining us. All right, from Roland Stuff, he asks, hi Greg, I'm changing a piano part by using follow my chord track and experimenting with different chord selections. As I do this, I drag the new chord I'm trying from the chord track into the part, and the sound changes as expected, but the MIDI notes in the lower window stay the same, so it sounds fine, but it hasn't stored my revised chord choices as MIDI. Any thoughts, please? All right. So let me just come over here. We have an electric piano part. Take this. Great, so let's listen. All right, so let's say I want this. Okay, changing. So it says follow my chord track. All right, so let's take a look at our notes that are in our event here in the part. Okay, so I'm going to select this particular part, and we'll go to our chords, and we'll choose to so let's say we want to follow the chords, and usually I get follow directly. I have choices here, so I'm going to just say follow directly, and now so now that's following the chord track. It says I dragged a new chord I'm trying from the chord track into the part, and the sound changes. So usually, so let's say if I want to come here and I wanted this to be, let's say, a G major chord, then I would, right, so I'm just going to synchronize the view here. All right, so let's see, as I change the chord here, if that, yeah, so that seems to automatically update track, but when the MIDI notes in the lower windows stay the same, so it sounds fine, but it isn't stored my revised chord choices as MIDI. So mine seems to automatically change, as you can see here, based on the chord. As I'm kind of modifying the chord here, say from F major to D major, we see that that seems to be moving the part, but that's, again, after I chose to have this part, follow our chords under the chords. So let me know if you have the chords and you have the follow chord track set here, if you have it for chords and scales or just chords. But I have it set to just chords, and at that point, when I change the chord in the chord track, it seems to automatically update it in the MIDI event for us. So let me know if I did something differently. All right, so we have Alex joining from Mojave, Arizona. John Barry is just saying maybe the snare drum or TrackWest music is just out of range of the current controller. All right, so we have Soul Sound Official saying hello to everyone. Alex just says, great Zoom call is always last Friday as usual. Yeah, those are always wonderful. I enjoy those quite a bit. It was great to see my friend Chris Estes, who I haven't seen in person in probably 12 years or so. So from the Bahamas, incredibly talented inventor and musician, engineer. All right, so we have RMBO01 saying hello from Sweden. Paul Curran just says, thanks, Greg. All right, and we have Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo, California. All right, Michael Teams is back in the United States from Scotland, his trip. We hope you had a wonderful vacation. We missed having you last week and missed seeing you on the Zoom. Assuming you're back in, but hope you had a great trip. Right, we see Michael Teams is back at the homestead, so we'll all get our favorite virtual ice cream. All right, let me jump to a question that we had mailed in. So we had a question on tempo detection accurately with pickup notes. Let me come over. All right, so we had a audio file that kind of sounds like this. All right, so we don't really have a correlation. Now, in this case, what we have is kind of a pickup note here. So we see the beginning here. We have a little cymbal roll. So my technique to get this to kind of work accurately, is just to move the particular event, like where the downbeat is. I'm going to just turn my snap off, and we say this is probably going to be like our downbeat, roughly here. So now as I move, I'm just going to align the downbeat here. All right. Now, once I have that downbeat aligned, what I could do is a tempo detection of that. So let's come over here. Let's do our tempo detection. So I'll go under my project menu, tempo track to tempo detection, analyze. Now, sometimes as you do this, you may have to, I'll divide by 2. And I'll just do, let's say, so at this point, I just did a quick offbeat correction. So we could just have, and as we do that, we would have a tempo track and a signature track. So if we want that to be on beat 1, I would just take, the tempo detection places it into 1/4, and now we could say 4/4, and we'll have our pickup note. And then I got kind of a follow-up email. Is about kind of similar situation with a file later in the song where there's perhaps like maybe meter changes and how I would work with that. So it's good to take a listen. All right, let me just copywritten material. So let me Right, so let me move this. All right, so I'm going to just do a quick separation of stems. All right, so now we should. I'll just do this in spectral layers real quick. Vocals easily. Unmix just the vocals. Right, so sometimes you may have syncopations and also, different meter changes, which could affect, the actual tempo detection. So we'll take a look at this file. I'm just going to impose on someone's copyright with the vocal here. All right, so we're going to have some fluctuating tempo here. So I'm going to just take this. We're going to start this on the downbeat here. So I'm just going to put my snap on. Okay, so I'm going to do a tempo detection. So we'll do the same principle that we did before. So we'll come here to your tempo track, tempo detection. Analyze. So let's go ahead and listen to the tempo detection. So I think as we kind of go through this. just going to remove that. Let me sure. So just unmix the vocals here quick. Okay, so let's go ahead and these things you all right, so I'm going to do my tempo detection on this again. So we have that, so we'll do our tempo detection. All right, now as we have tempo detection, we could leave that window open, and this places us into sure why we lost the. All right, so one more time here. Respect copyright. Seconds left. Seconds. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna render this particular file. Drag this out. Okay, so we have just our instrumental part here. Do a quick bounce selection. So now when we play, all right, so I'm going to do my tempo detection. So let's say I think that this is, I would need to divide by 2. All right, so let's listen to. don't think there's any meter changes in this, and that seems to kind of... So, I mean, that all seemed to work kind of as expected for me. So just doing that, so, you know, I just have the tempo, but sometimes, you know, some parts may be synchronized, and at that point you may have to adjust. You know, what happens often is, you know, we could take like your tempo track here. If you need to make adjustments, you know, if you have like your tempo track that you're seeing here, you know, you could just use like the warp tool, and this is why you have the warp grid. And at that point, you could just kind of move the measure to kind of fall on the downbeat, and then it will recalculate. So as soon as you do the tempo detection, it's automatically going to place you in the mode where you have the warp grid tool active so that you could listen to it and make changes. But everything sounded like it was in 4/4 to me on that particular project. All right, let me jump back to some live questions. All right, so we have a question from Daniel Pashman. Says, when using MIDI, I tend to have separate events when copying and pasting, but I always run into the issue where little bits of MIDI get chopped that I can't even see. Is there a way to prevent this? I tend to leave separate events when copying and pasting, but always little bits of MIDI get chopped that I can't even see. Okay, so let me just jump back. Different project here. Okay. Leave separate events when copying and pasting, but always run into issue where little bits of MIDI get chopped that I can't even see. So if you're like copying, so let's say if I have a number of little MIDI events here, I'll make this larger. You know, so one thing is sometimes, you know, when people overdub MIDI, you may have, so let's say if I'm here, the default MIDI record mode that we can see here in the bottom is, let's say if I want to do a new part, so as I'm recording in, all right, so you may have parts that are overlapping other parts, perhaps. So, you know, see what happens if we, you know, so maybe if I have an overlapping part and I copy this over, that there's still kind of the underlying part. So if I just jump here, let's say now I have this part. So there could be, so I copied this event, but it could still be underlying events. So let's say if I have two overlapping events, so I'm not sure if you've thought of maybe using like the range tool. And so if I make a copy with the range tool, that will copy all of the underlying events. So if you have MIDI events that are buried underneath, it could be that, you know, when you copy, you may copy kind of the top layer, but not. So again, if I come here, I'll just change the color on this part to illustrate this a little better. So I have this red part on top of the green part. So if I move this green part and copy it over, I could move that part, but we can still have kind of underlying or overlapping parts as well. But if we utilize the range tool for that, it copies everything in that specific range, be right over there. So let me know if you get the same results if you copy kind of using the range tool, or if you have overlapping MIDI events. Okay, so we see from Rick from Bratman Studio says, "Hey Greg, I run my master keyboard to MIDI interface on the Focusrite 4A4 to Cubase 15 Pro. Everything works well out of Cubase to my USB 2600, notes pitch bend, no mod wheel. How to make that work?" Okay, so I guess you want to take your master keyboard and send it out to your 2600. So if the 2600 is connected via, so you would need to make a MIDI track, since we're going out, I assume, to a hardware 2600, I think you have. So we're going to make a MIDI track. So, and at this point, we could say our MIDI input, we could choose all MIDI inputs. At this point, we could just say, okay, what hardware? So, and you'd probably see if you have your USB going out to the ARP 2600, you would just, in the output ports, so you would just come right over here to output port, make sure that you have the USB for the ARP 2600 selected, make sure that you have the correct MIDI channel here, so you probably see your ARP 2600 listed as a MIDI device. So let's say, okay, I'm going to my UR24C, but I don't have that ARP connected, or the Korg 2600. I'm not sure if it's an original or the Korg version, but you just set the MIDI output port. It's not from an instrument channel unless you've specified it as an external instrument track, but that will get MIDI out to your ARP 2600 over the USB connection. And then what you do with the sound of that, some people will bring the sound back into Cubase as an external instrument, or if you have a mixer, a lot of people will use a mixer so you can monitor the audio outputs of your external monitor, of your external MIDI devices. All right, so we see Michael Teams, 1 gallon of Highland Mist ice cream. Jazz dude. The Memento is getting 1 gallon of French vanilla ice cream. So we see DJ Henke saying hello to the Cubase family. We see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Great to see you on. Hope you're enjoying your new guitar. Thanks for sharing your photos. Looks beautiful. Yeah, I had a friend got a Les Paul with the robot tuning system, as they call it. States store couldn't sell it because of that, so he got like a ridiculously great deal on his Les Paul. All right, so we see Tiago joining in from Brazil. Being here. Michael Team says it's a long flight back home from Scotland to Texas. All right, so we see 54 Beatmaker says, I know Steinberg don't reveal features before release, but can we expect clip launchers in Cubase 16? Generally, as you mentioned, we don't reveal new features. So, but I'm sure that the teams at Steinberg are working on all sorts of great stuff. Sometimes they come up with stuff that we don't know we need yet. It's always helpful. So we see John Costigan joining from a hot Wisconsin. Hope you survived all of the weather that was there last week. Glad you got your electricity back after such a long outage. Everything you ever wanted will be. All right, so we see ESE Gates 1024. How can I split audio from video? Okay, so generally by default, audio will automatically be extracted from video. So I think there's a preference for this. That is the default state. It says come over here to video and say automatically extract audio in import video file. So I'll just come over, let's do a new project. All right, so now when I go to import video file, and so once we have that set up, we can see that the video, when it's imported, will automatically be extracted on its own file. I will take that preference off. So, and see if we could manually do it. But again, go to your preferences or settings to video. We have automatically extract the video file. So if that is turned off and you already have imported the video file, I'm right over here. Great. And then I think we it's okay, from the media menu. Now you can come right over here and choose extract audio from video file. Give it a really temporary folder. It wants to, sorry. At this point, you direct it to the video file again. And now the audio is extracted from video. Okay, so we see from Steve Green says, Greg, I noticed you use a Rhodes VST. I can't seem to find it in the plugins. Which package does it come with? So there's a number of Rhodes patches that are in Hallian Sonic. So the one I always, my kind of default Rhodes patch is, I think it's under Sonic Selection, which comes with Cubase, called Silk Rhodes. So, but there's a number of and then if you want to put more chorus on. And you can put reverb on it as well. So usually that's mine, but look, if you just come over to, let's say just within Sonic selections, go to keyboards, to electric piano, there's or if you want like the rich chorus. If you want it. And if you want it more like kind of DX7, go back to 1984. So all sorts. So that's just within the Hallian Sonic selection. So that's the one. I usually go for Silk Roads as my default. But there's lots of great roads, and even in the other libraries that come with Hallian as well. All right, so we see Val says he's still working, but he's listening with half an ear for the Cubase string. So we see from DJ Henke, he says, did you have a chance to check the naming functionality on Cubase 12 to compare it to Cubase 15? I didn't over the weekend. Sorry, I forgot to do that. I'll download it in the background here and see if we could get it up and running. Sorry about that. Download 12, see if I can install it quickly here. So we had a question on naming themes, like how we increment names of tracks. And if I remember right, it was with MIDI tracks and how the numbers are incremented. So I'll remove these files here, these tracks. Then I want to come over and let's add MIDI tracks. Call this bass. I think if we called it bass 1, and then I'm going to add, say, 5, bass 1, 01, 02, 03, 04, 5. See if that's the same question, if it's handled the same way. It goes bass 1, bass 2, bass 3, bass 4. Question. Done installing it. Sorry, I forgot to check that over the weekend. I'm busy enjoying my weekend with my. Gareth is taking the robot tuners off. New Gibson guitar, or due to him Gibson guitar. Okay, so let me just jump and we'll open up Cubase 12. Okay, so we saw that when I said base 1 that it automatically did base 101, base 1, see if it's the same. Out there. Okay. All right, so now we're going to jump. Add MIDI tracks. Call this base 1. It looks like it's the same naming convention, so it's like base 101. Let's jump back to Cubase 15. So it looks like those naming conventions are the same. But let me know if I'm misremembering exactly what it is, but it looks identical between 15, 12 here. Or if I need to add a different character when renaming. So let me know. Looks like it's the same consistent behavior, 12 and 15 with the naming functionality with that. But let me know if I'm misremembering. All right, wonderful to see Beverly Beatty on. Still in Manchester, UK. It says more cowbell, please. So if you want a free cowbell, Beverly, one of the things that Steinberg did is they brought back some of their classic VST instruments, including LM7. So if you wanted to come over here, you could have some of your classic sounds, and one of them you'll have is a percussion kit. So with your very own cowbell that you could tune. And adjust velocity. So you get a free cowbell. So you get this and some of the other classics, some of the very first VST instruments ever released, like Neon, CS40, VB1, LM7. So that'll be a free cowbell for Beverly. Heads up. But we hope you're having a wonderful time in Manchester. Okay, Jackie Barr asks, when using Groove Agent, how is the workflow? Do I choose a kit first, then a loop, or choose one shots to build a kit, or what? I'm new to this part. So you could start, any of those are viable ways of starting with Groove Agent. So if you want to start with Groove Agent, some people will start Groove Agent and okay, I want like a virtual drummer to play. Like I don't want to be inspired by merely a click track. So some people may load up. Let's say we'll come over here to like Punch Kit and just say, okay, I want to come over and say, okay, I want a player. I want to select this pad and follow the transport. So some people may, instead of a click, they may just have Groove Agent play along. Then you could do Living After Midnight by Judas Priest. But you could just come over here and start. So some people will build a kit from scratch. So some people may come over here and say, okay, I want to cut the kit all together. So some people may come over here and say, okay, now I want to work with my own samples. So I've curated my own samples. So let's say I just want to come over and let's say, okay, I want, to find a hand clap. All right, so I want my hand clap on, D sharp. I want, let's say, my percussion. I could just, come right over here. I want a percussion on that pad. I want a snare on this pad. And let's look for kick drum. All right, so now I can carry my own samples over. And I'm not sure if there's a cowbell in here for Beverly. Say cowbell. All right, so now when I come over here, all right, so now that I have this, I could say, okay, let's go to our player, and I could just click on the pattern. So we could now come over and say, all right, so let's say, so now I could have that as a pattern if I wanted to. So we could just come over here and build our own patterns. So if you wanted to start with a drum loop and have that play, so let's say I have this pattern playing, but maybe I want to have a pad that's just going to be an actual drum loop. So let's find a loop. So I'm going to drag this audio file over, and then we could just have this loop we could come over to, let's say to our sample, and we could say, okay, let's warp this to our project tempo. We have different warping algorithms. So now if I say, okay, let's come over to our pattern again. So I go to the player tab. I can now just have this particular pattern. So as we play, I could have that loop play in as well. So when I come over here, so let's say if I want to make this just one. So this way we could kind of, take in, different audio loops if you want. If you want it to be like a virtual drummer, you could do that. If you wanted to treat it kind of like more along the lines of like an Akai MPC paradigm of production, you could do all of those things in Groove Agent. So it's really however you need to use drums to start with in your project. You could just simply, use Groove Agent for just about any type of percussion task. So let me know if that makes sense. Seeing Garrett just says you could do all those things. Jackie Barr was asking. So you see Garrett says, I'm sorry if you're disappointed with my D-Robo tuning of the SG, but for example, just to unwind the strings is a 4-button combination press. So I'm not disappointed. I've only seen one person really do it successfully, and it was kind of the prototype, and I think I mentioned it, like Peter Frampton, who had switched between kind of standard tuning and open tuning for a slide solo. And always fun. Gareth saying that the RoboTuner is not very practical if you have a string break in a live setting. Just need a better roadie. Gazia says, yes, Greg doesn't even know everything. So I learn new stuff on live streams all the time. I usually get asked questions before other people do. So. All right, Jackie Barr says, another Groove Agent or drums in general question. Why are 6/8 loops so hard to find? Are there any libraries that might have more of them? So, I think most music isn't in 6/8, but also I think 6/8 beats are really easy to do. So let's say if we're having a project here, so let's say our meter, I'll just add a signature track. All right, so let's say our meter is 6/8. Okay. All right, so I'm going to add, let's say, we'll do a Groove Agent, SE. So, there's a lot less sometimes a lot less, 6/8 is a bit more predictable for drum patterns. So let's say if I come over here. Right, so. Okay, so I will just quickly create just I will come over, let's adjust, let's say our click pattern here. So as we're applying, and I'll just solo this. Let's go into like the drum editor. We could do it in the pattern editor as well. Get our app from it. Okay, so now we come over here, we have a 6/8 pattern. So most 6/8 patterns are going to be pretty similar. So let's say, and I'll just slow it. It's in the loop. All right, so let's say we come over here, we do kick. So like the vast majority of here. So obviously not every drum pattern, so we could also have. So a lot of times when you're, so I think why you don't see, a lot of drum patterns in 6/8 is, most 6/8 drum patterns are going to be very similar because, you're going to have the same downbeat. You may not have the same amount of groove going on in 6/8. So, but if you want to look for patterns that are 6/8 based, let's just come over to our instrument and let's go into, if we kind of sneak over here, we could say, okay, I'm looking for, and we'll say, okay, let's go to all. And as we're doing this, let's go to, your different kits. And, we have as one of the criteria, we could say, okay, let's look at the signature. So, you have 12/8 here. So 12/8 will often work. You have 3/4 patterns. But if you say, okay, let's look for, 6/8, you could, let's see, this, I think, have a 12/8. So let's say, but as you let me just, but you can see, so let's just take this 12/8 pattern here. And I could take that 12/8 pattern, just drop it, say to my player pad. So when we come over here, this is just in the blues kit. We can now just have. So 12/8 patterns, 3/4 patterns will work in 6/8 as well. So, it's just not as popular a meter for most music and content creators. So, but there are some that come directly inside of Cubase. But for loops, most people, so if you're looking for loops, that could be a different thing. But, programming 6/8, 12/8, 3/4 patterns in Cubase. So, your comments. Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. We see Randy Lee music. Physical therapy is done. I hope it went well and your recovery is going well. Okay, so you see from DJ Henke says, yes, that is correct. I'm trying to figure out a way to use the project logical editor to fix this. There's no worries, Greg. Thanks for all the time. So let me know if you wanted it to just be, just the, if you wanted to get rid of just that one that's in between. So, might be able to, I'll just take another quick stab at the project logical editor. I think we could do kind of before or after. The naming, so let me just. Say if I go. Great, so let's see if we do replace search string with like base 1 with just base. So if you want it to get rid of like the 1, let's say you have base 1, 0, 1, base 1, 0, 2, base 1, 0, 3, and you want it to get rid of that 1 that's in between, try just coming over here, do transform. You want to say the container type is equal to track, and then we could say replace search string base 1. So we're going to take base 1 and turn that into base. So we see these 3 tracks here, and then I could just come right over there and just simply place to get rid of that number 1. So if that's what you want to do, try that. Sorry, I didn't think of that the other day. But let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. Okay, Henke. Arthur's saying, I'm a force to be reckoned with. Try to help people. Gareth says, I think Greg is really angry at me for taking those robo tuners off. I'm really passionately ambivalent. So I know most people have taken them off. So, and most people got a great deal on their guitar because they had the robo tuners and replaced them. Jazz dude saying, oh, like Rosetta mode, don't. See that Pablo is prepping for another gig. 28 days of gigs in August. Busy. All right, so we see that from DJ Henke says maybe the naming change was even an earlier version, so you're remembering right. I'll learn how to use the project logical editor. So yeah, let me know if that would work for you, what I just showed. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer sending greetings from Yuma, Arizona. Congratulations on the sale of your house. Great to see you on the Zoom social. All right, Paul Kerr asks, hi Greg, what's the best way to program a drum roll fill in the pattern editor? Okay, so it's got convert. Okay, so let's come over here. Say, all right, so I'm gonna do just generic. All right, so let's say I have this as a pattern here. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this pattern. So we have pattern 1, pattern 2. So let's say in this pattern, I want to come over here and let's just do fill. And let's take this pattern. I will duplicate this pattern. Those, let's put in a all right, now we could even do even a little more interesting where I could right click. Let's double the length of the pattern here. And for my hi-hats, I want to double the step resolution of my hi-hats. So now you could go back to kind of the original pattern. So if I was to drag this into my project window, I would just kind of come over here. So let's say, okay, we have our drum. So I'm going to drag this pattern over. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that a couple of times. Right, and then I want this to go to pattern 2, back to pattern 1, pattern 2, then let's say these I want to be pattern 3, so as we play in our project. Take it off of. So we have one pattern here, one fill, no fill. So you could just kind of take like one pattern, duplicate the pattern, and then you could just add a fill into that particular pattern as well. That way you could kind of have the same groove going on, maybe the same kick and hi-hat pattern, and do something with the snares or cowbell or percussion, stuff like that. So try that and let me know if that makes sense for you. Brian Sawyers received 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream. My Chatfield jumped. So we see Jackie Barr says, yes, thanks for drum tips. The 12/8 was the only one I could find. I was trying to actually find a percussion loop to fit a 6/8 gospel tune. You know, so let's say if you want to, you know, do like a percussion thing in 6/8, let's say, you know, you could also use the pattern editor to do this. So let's just create a new drum track. We'll show you some other. You could just make a percussion. So let's make a drum machine track. Do this on our pattern editor. Let's put in, let's say we want different percussion. So for Beverly, of course, we'll need our cowbell. Add it. Do a kick here. All right, so let's say now when I go into my pattern editor, so we'll say, okay, let's get to our editor now, and I will just say, let's make 12 steps. So let's say I want to come here, let's do kick. So let's come over here. Let's just randomize some of our, and we can also do Euclidean. And let's shift this over. pattern editor to come up with different, and obviously you use different sounds for a gospel 6/8 fill, but you could just, switch your patterns to be 12 steps instead of 16. And then it's very easy to kind of come up with your own, your own patterns that could work in 12/8, 6/8, 3/4. Great. So see if we turn down the volume, click track, adjust my click volume. Sorry about that. So we see Brian is having electricity and carpeting done in his studio next week. Exciting. Rolling stuff has to take off. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we see from my throat real quick. From TrackQuest Music is just asking, how can I take an existing key command and add it to my Novation MIDI keyboard button? So when you're working with like a MIDI remote, so it's not necessarily like the keyboard shortcut that's going to be applied because the Novation doesn't understand your keyboard shortcut. But let's say you're doing a keyboard shortcut for turning on your cycle mode. So you have like the slash key on your numeric keypad that does that. If I want the same function to happen here, we could make a MIDI remote script. So a lot of the Novation controllers have MIDI remote scripts. So as we come over here, we could just say, so we could double click on it, but I could also just right click on the parameter. So if it's something that's kind of clickable, you could right click and say MIDI remote pick up for mapping, hit the button on your MIDI controller, and then just say apply mapping. So now I could hit that button and turn on and off my function in a program. If it's something that's kind of buried in a menu that doesn't have, not every parameter you could right click on for MIDI remote mapping, a lot of different areas you can. But if not, you have so when you go to the mapping assistant, so with your, if you come right over here, we could just do a search for topics. So say, okay, I want this button to turn snap on and off. So I could say, okay, we want to go snap on and off, and I want it on this button, and then hit apply mapping. So you don't necessarily assign a keyboard shortcut, but the function in a program can be assigned using kind of the MIDI remote. If you don't have a MIDI remote script, which I always recommend, you could go to your studio setup. You can add something called a generic remote. So once you go to a generic remote, you could set your MIDI input and output here. So at that point, you could set your MIDI inputs and outputs, and then this would be the incoming MIDI message. This would be the function that it's actually controlling. Now, once you do this, there is a MIDI learn. So you could say, okay, when I click here, it's going to capture that MIDI message for me. And then everything is kind of broken down into categories where you can say, okay, I want to go to, my commands. And then you could see all of your different sections. So once you go to, let's say, your command, then all the functions in the program could be in here. So everything will just be kind of broken down by category. So don't assign the keyboard shortcut, but assign the function using the MIDI remote or generic remote. Then that'll probably do the trick for you. All right, so we have Peter Raymond checking in from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from DJ Hanky says yes before you could type MIDI 02, then we continue to write 03, 04. Earlier versions of Cubase, now it always starts with what you write and 01 over again. So I will make a point. On my studio PC, my personal PC, I have versions back to 3 installed. So. Sure why Gareth is concerned. I'm going to berate him about removing his RoboTuner. All right, so we see from Captenergy Music says, hey Greg, Halion 7.5 is pretty nice. Really looking forward to seeing what else drops. Sounds like it's going to be the launch year of exciting changes. Yeah, I mean, Steinberg has always done exciting things. Like every time I get to work with a new version of Cubase, I still feel like it's Christmas opening it up for the very first time. It's the mystery of new functionality and stuff, so. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on from Montana. Hope that you're safe from the fires. The fires in Spokane don't work their way into Montana. But everyone give a big woof to Mark Rabin's dog, Stella. Chatfield may have jumped. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, so we see from John Barry says, evening, Greg. I have an 8-bar part following chords. When I cut and paste or duplicate to bars 9 through 16, which do not have chords, the chord track copy loses notes, but not controller data. Why? All right, so let me see if I could reduce this. All right, so I'm going to take this electric piano part here. So we have 8 bars of chords. I'm going to tell this to follow the chord track. So when we double click here, we will see our MIDI notes adjust, follow the chord track. Right, so we see that our MIDI data has changed. I'm going to duplicate this. So we have our chord track here. Let me duplicate. Let's seems like both parts are there. So we had that starting with an E2, come over here. Um, E2 there, we have 2 there, so okay, so let's see if so let's see if I come over here, if I bounce the MIDI selection. Okay, so we come here, let's again move this event. See, that's not following the chords. So let me see if when I follow the chord track, invert this before we did our changes. Okay, so before the chord track, our first note is D sharp 2. Going to duplicate. Great, so duplicate this track here. Okay, so this track, I'm gonna say, let's follow the chord track. I'm just gonna try to analyze the chords first instead of follow directly. We have an E minor chord here. Okay, so instead of follow directly, so I want to duplicate these particular tracks here, and we'll see if that's different. Now let me see if these are the same. Okay, so it's not following the chord track. So let me see if there's kind of one indicate transpositions. Let's see if it's when there's a transpose track. Curious if there's a way to like render this is following the chord track so that when I do change the chord, that I change this chord here to a G chord, that those notes will change and follow the chord track. Let's see what happens if I do a shared copy. Fire. So this one is kind of following chords. Let me just see if, let's see if I do maybe a freeze MIDI modifiers. Those notes changed there. Let me just open this up as an in-place editor. Okay, so I'm going to tell this to follow chords. We'll say follow directly. We'll see our MIDI notes. Do it on this one here. Okay, so we see our notes here. Let's have it follow the chords. Those all change. See if there's anything in the MIDI menu to kind of, I think it's in kind of a dynamic state where it's not actually playing notes, but it's following the chord track. The I just did a mid-merge MIDI in loop. Erase the second part so we can make a copy. This also just color event. Duplicate this. Got it in place editor. Okay, so here we have. Yeah, it seems to, like, once we have that track follow the chords, see if set the event now be dependent. Yeah, they're different pitches still. I'll play around with that, John, see if I can figure out if there's a way to kind of render the MIDI. I know if it was multiple that we could, do a, just do like a bounce MIDI. But I'll play around with that to see if I could figure out kind of the logic on that. But yeah, it seems a little odd to me. Well, sorry about that. Okay. Beverly just says, thanks, Greg, for the extra cowbell today. So you're welcome. All right. Bratman Studio says, I missed it. Where do we get the first VST released, reissued instruments? So if you just go to the Steinberg website, so you need to register on the Steinberg website with your Steinberg account. So we'll come over here. So you can find out all of the products that are on the anniversary sale. So Howling 7 collection, electric bass, T guitar. So lots of different etudes. So lots of great instruments are on sale. But if you want the freebies as a download, you see these 5 plugins. There's 4 instruments and a delay. Just click on Get the Steinberg Classics free. Then that will sync it to your account, and then you would find it. Once you do that, you would find it in the download assistant. So once you link from the web page, then you would see it under your Steinberg Classics. It's just a 35 megabyte download. So yeah, the very first VST instrument in 1999 was Neon. Came with Cubase 3.7 on Windows. Memory serves right. It was August 99. Raw Justice Hip Hop says he's number 72 on the like, fresh in from Washington, D.C., beating people up in Mahjong all morning. Good job. All right, so we see Chris Harrison that they want note repeat in Cubase, please. Two comments that Chris Harrison doesn't like the note repeat in Groove Agent. Worked pretty easily for me. Great, so we see Captain Energy Music saying hello to everyone. So you see Adam Langford says the best thing about the classic plugins that Steinberg releases, they are free and tiny. So yeah, they're small in size. One thing that people may not realize also when you go to load up one of the instruments. Like if you see like, okay, neon, you open it up and it's like not as, if you want to adjust the scaling of it, you can also just come right over here and go to user interface scaling. So if you wanted to very large, you could do that just by clicking here. Then you could adjust for all the Steinberg programs. So if you wanted to be very small, the original size, enter VST3. So seeing people complaining online that they wouldn't be able to use them for like the Apple Silicon processors, so they've been updated to VST3. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin, says, do I click multi and set kits to the same MIDI channel to get 2 or 3 or 4 kits to fire at once, each on matching patterns when I record the MIDI channel, or am I just recording one kit? Okay, so I think this is with Groove Agent. I'll just do this on a new project. So let's just add our Groove Agent instance. We'll do a full Groove Agent here. Okay, so let's say I want to have do like a future past perfect here. Right, so let's say we have this, and I can remember how to, it's in the full, and option, see the kits get off by default. Let me just switched the settings on. Grab my brain cramp. Okay, so we'll say use multi. Okay. Now we have, let's say, a Groove Agent here. So let's just get to the player. So let's say I'm playing this pattern here. All right, so now I want to go to my percussion agent, say. All right, so now we will come over here. And let's go to our third kit. Say, we'll do Phillips Studio Drums. Okay, and let's get to our fourth kit. into kit. Okay, so now we have kind of all these different kits kind of playing at once. All right, so let's come over to, let's say, our player tab and go to all right, so as soon as I come over here, we can now so I will play kind of all of the different patterns. So when I trigger a pattern, if this is Mark's question, it says my recorded on MIDI channel, am I just recording to one kit? So if I think each of these would show up as different MIDI channels, but since they're all, let's go ahead and I'm just going to record different patterns. So now I've recorded that pattern change, and as we do this, and again, once we come over here, let's say to our players, I want to definitely switch this to be on different, say, MIDI channel 5. So we can see that we have channel 4, channel 3, channel 2 for each of the different players. So when I come here, I click on the first, and we come over, we can see that's MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2. So, but as we want to play this out, I'm going to set this to, I think, set this to channel 5 now. So at this point, you know, instrument 1 is channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. And then our drum patterns can be on channel 5. So if I send these notes out here, and this is on channel 5, that is just triggering the patterns here. Now these patterns can also, so when we switch, they'll all kind of switch at the same time. But we could choose to have these, you know, not be linked as well. So if you want to just come over, you know, you could have kind of independent, so you have different kits that are playing that aren't always going to be the same exact pattern. Remember, but yeah, there's a kind of a switch for that, so that they don't have to all be the same pattern. They could function independently as well. So, but let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to do, Mark, to have multiple Groove Agent patterns triggered in real time. That. So Michael Teams is kind enough to grant my family and myself 1 gallon of Texas frosted caramel chocolate ice cream. Self and my family. Wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, so Mark Rabin asks, if I replace a snare from kit pieces, is it round robin or is it just replaced? What happens if I replace 2 snares in Groove Agent 6? Is it round robin or both at all times? I want both to sound. Right, so let's over here. So let's say if I'm playing do it with a let's do it with a acoustic agent kit. Great, so say all right, so let's say if I want to replace the kick here, so let's add Simon Phillips jazz kick. All right, so now we're hearing both the original kick layered with so I think that these will be layered. I'm not sure if they do the round robin, but let's see if we could check. So if we mute, great. So let's see if we set this up for if I could find, I think it might be layered, but let's see if we could, if I could figure out how to do get it to do round robin. Like we could set velocity, but I don't see the round robin for that. I think we might be able to do it in a beat agent kit. But I think that this would just be layered when we come here, and then we could choose a particular velocity level, change that. So we could change the velocity level to go to bring in the kick or switch, but I don't think we do round robin on that. I'll do some more research on it, Mark, see if I across anything else that would allow us, if that's what you want to do, if you want to round robin between two layered kicks or two layered snares. All right, so John, this question earlier in a chord track says, so use chord track a bunch in my workflow. Typically what I do, let it create a chord track, and then I take a MIDI track, turn off scales and layout in chord track, and then drag to MIDI. So I'll play around with it more. I understand kind of the workflow to see if it's a way to kind of lock the particular chords when you do it. We just had our idea to see. still have up. So I'm going to see, just out of curiosity, if we choose to lock the pitches of the events, that copies correctly over. Quick look here. See if we could lock. Yeah, it's probably not gonna look. See if we. There can be different pitches, but we'll just. Looks like they're different pitches. So I'll play around with it some more, John. Seems like I understand what you want to accomplish with it. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so back to where I was. Great. So we see Peter is mentioning in Montreal. Feels like it's 31 degrees. Having a great day. Montreal's hosting a National Bank's tennis tournament. Great. See Mark Raven's doing okay with the air quality. Through comments. You see DJ Henke has to go. Henke just mentions he learns new things about Cubase almost every day. Same here. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl Daniela Tocan on from Bochum, Germany. Thanks for joining us today. Mark Rabin just says, I wish there was a toggle in Cubase to turn off the Windows key. Yeah, please. So, yeah, I mean, some things are always going to be fixed as part of the operating system. So I think the Windows key might be one of them. So we see from DaVinci Girl says, was Halligan a topic today? Never did use it. So, we're answering questions on Halligan. There's a new version released today. So, but yeah, you should check it out. All sorts of wonderful sound design aspects of it. Mark Raven says is going to. Adam Langford just says you could always pull the Windows key off the keyboard. So I know Eric Gregson Williams, when he kind of transitioned from Mac to PC, his staff gave him a Mac keyboard and he just would literally take buttons off so he wouldn't hit the wrong button all the time. Okay, so we see from Val, as I record a lot of remixes, life currently with my input on my interface, I have various gain stages. I'm pretending different stages of sets, but want to be in a reasonable level. Normalize. So if you've recorded audio into Cubase, so let's say if I come over, for consistency's sake, so let me just find my sampler track. Okay, so probably right above it here, I have just a single note. So let's say if I render this in place, I will get, say just standard audio file here. So if you have a number of audio files where you think that you could be getting and you need more consistent levels, you could set up just a keyboard shortcut just for when you go to your audio menu, you go to your processes, and then there you could just choose to normalize, and it'll kind of keep it at the same value. So you can say, okay, my peak normalization, I want it -3. So as soon as we come over here, or you could do it in loudness units, which is helpful if you're doing like post-production or you want your final mix to be like -14 LUFS for streaming. You could just come over here. If you do have recordings from multiple sources and you're afraid that the levels aren't consistent, maybe you're recording it from streaming services or YouTube and getting samples, you could consolidate kind of all of your sample-based files for consistent levels using normalize. All right, great to see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. So we see, what normalize do for a 10 to 45 minute continuous clip recording. Again, it's just like when you have audio files that are going to be kind of low in volume, you could just have the peaks, bring up the volume so that you'll have kind of consistent overall peak volume levels. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin, going back to the Groove Agent questions, as a great warning, what does it mean locking pads? This is part of my lack of knowledge. So sometimes when you load up different kits, if you're not, while you're doing that, it could have overlapping pads that are being used for triggering the patterns and triggering sounds. So some kits too, so you don't have to have separate MIDI channels for the for working, so you don't have to have this, if you don't have separate MIDI channels. Some of the smaller kits, you may have 16 patterns and 32 sounds or 24 sounds, and they don't overlap. But if you have like an acoustic kit where you have maybe 64 different samples of a hi-hat and 12 different samples of a snare and a kick, and you need to work with all of those, that's when you could make sure that you're not overlapping notes between patterns and pads. All right. All right, so we see from Daniela, it says, do not use Halion because the library does not follow standards. I use the standard is SoundMiner and UCS. So I don't think SoundMiner does like instrument sounds. So as you just mentioning that drums should be on channel 10 like in the past with hardware, because then it doesn't interfere with the synths and piano organs on channels 1 through 9. Yeah, so the only reason that drums were originally fixed on MIDI channel 10 is because a lot of gamers would play back music. They would play back MIDI music on games that had low bandwidth. And what they would do is go out and get a Roland MT32. So the Roland MT32 had drums fixed on channel 10. So that became kind of the basis for general MIDI. So you don't have to have your drums on channel 10. Why that's prevalent is just because the general MIDI standard, and it's all due to the Roland MT32 where the drums were fixed and could not be on any other channel but channel 10. So just a little historical perspective. But they could be on any channel now. As you just says, grateful that we work in the box now. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says, Greg, I'm great with layers. I want them to both sound, or 3 to sound together to add girth and texture and interest. I do not need round robin. I want simulcast. So yeah, you can do that very easy. That field jumped. All right, so we see from Da Vinci Girl says, Greg, in the Zoom stream as one of the participants did a drum demo. Can you explain what he has done and how he's gotten his drum sound? There a step-by-step demonstration possible? So I'm not sure if it was Chris Estes who's done drum stuff. I mean, he's a drummer. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. So I'm not sure if he has like, I don't know if he has any tutorials available or he's just working to get stuff done. So sometimes I've found that a lot of people that are working active audio engineers may not share their secrets. So I don't know of So if it was with Chris Estes, who's based in the Bahamas, who's talking about like his solar energy rig for his house. I don't know of any tutorials has. You may be able to find tutorials. He developed a system called CLASP, which is a closed loop audio system processing or closed loop analog sound processing that would allow you to kind of work with an analog to process the audio through an analog tape machine before capturing it in the DAW. But I don't think he has any step-by-step demonstrations on drums, if that's who you're referring to. We see Brandon Sills says, man, I almost missed a Cubase live stream on my birthday. Mega Loler. So happy birthday, Brandon. Thanks for joining us on your birthday. Hope you have a wonderful day of celebration. Great. Gerald Ely says, question, what is the LM7 that you demoed earlier? So the LM7 was kind of like the first generation Groove Agent SE. So the first kind of commercially available software drum machine was an LM4, and LM4 was had 16 pads, and it was a pretty revolutionary drum at the time. That has kind of morphed over into Groove Agent and Groove Agent SE. So a lot of those paradigms. Now, interestingly enough, there's lots of people still have projects with, so LM7 was a simple and effective drum machine so that we could, so if you wanted to come over here and just like be able to tune. So this was used on countless records because this is like really. So a lot of people didn't have to use their Alesis drum machine anymore if you want it more processed. And if you wanted to come over here, and this is part of a free collection that Steinberg released for the 25th anniversary of Hallion. They redid some of these instruments so that, like I just had to recreate a project for Jeremy from the Lumineers, where I had to, dig up an old version of Cubase to load up a project. So he was revisiting projects that he did 20 some years ago, and he had a lot of projects with the LM7. So it's just kind of a fun throwback VST plugin that Steinberg updated and is giving away free along with the CS40. The VB1, we'll show that as well, which is a great bass plugin. So, and these were like the plugins that came with Cubase back in the day. So if you wanted to come over here, you could go to VB1 and you could move your pick, move the pick up, and if you wanted to. So you get some really great kind of Motown, classic Motown Jamerson. If you actually listen to his bass isolated. But just great instruments. So check them out. They're free and are compatible with previous projects. Gerald Ely just says he loves this community. Thanks for the answers. So thanks for joining us today. Part of the community. All right, Brandon Sills says, have we gone over anything Hallian based in the stream aside from the videos that have been going up earlier this morning? Just asking. So we haven't had many Hallian questions, but yeah, Hallian 7.5 was released today. So there's going to be like new functionality in this spectral synth editing page. So, you know, if you want to go over to, let's say we'll open up your Hallian 7. Really the first streaming VST sampler that ever existed. But when you come over here, and now one of the cool things is you could actually just kind of search for, you know, different categories. Well, so let's say if, you know, we want to, we'll just do it in knit spectral synth. So now we'll edit that. So we'll go to our spectral zone. And now we could just see all of your different samples. So if you want to take kind of, you know, say a vocal sample here.
So we tried, but did we try?
So now we could just drag and drop that in. And as we kind of work with this, I can now just say, we tried. So we could take like different snapshots of different zones. If you wanted to add and then you could have like different effects like a blur. And so you just kind of jump back here. So you have different filters, oscillator section. So let's say, then you could even these different sections. So just kind of taking from a voice sample, be able to do all sorts of crazy stuff like that. And also MPE support. So if you have like controllers that do MPE, where you could have individual pitch bend information per note. So if, you know, that also works as well as part of Hallian. So lots of great new stuff in there, always performance optimizations. Okay, so we see, what about music notation and interpretation? All right, so let me just go to, say I will take this file here. Let's go, I'll solo the cello. So let's say if I want to, from here. So we've sequenced this in MIDI. Now if I want to just pop over to let's say if I'm in the key of D, I could just come over here. Let's make it, and we could drop this in, but this is all just straight interpretation of, you know. So we could also look at it in the page view, how it's going to actually be print it out. So, but that's no touching up, nothing at all. Just kind of taking that particular file and just opening it in a score editor so we could interpret the notation, even if the notes are a little early, a little late. We can just simply, have those be interpreted musically accurate. So Gareth says he's going to dive into the retro releases at some point. All right, so you see John Barry VU just saying, Grego's not getting any notes copying using control, using duplicate or copy and paste, which turned out to be having an X chord on bar 9 of the chord track. So it says, need check now if the notes are correct. Yeah, give that a try. You could always duplicate the chords with the events as well. All right, Johnny Petrovich says, is it possible to assign a macro to quickly turn on Melodyne? So when we do I don't think that, we could go into an extension, I think, but let me just see if I'll just kind of check. But since it's an extension, you're actually kind of leaving Cubase to go into a different environment. So like when you're in an extension, you don't use the keyboard shortcuts of Cubase, you use the keyboard shortcuts of the extension. So I think I don't think it's, we can make the extension permanent, we can remove the extension, but, because you can have multiple extensions within, so I could say, okay, do I want to load up Melodyne, Spectral Layers, Wavelab, all of these different types of extensions, and having a keyboard shortcut for something that doesn't exist in the program but is an extension is why often you don't see extensions going into kind of third-party environments. See, Mark Raven says he normalizes to LUFS first and then to peak. Catfield jumped. So I see Mark Raven just says, can you recommend a simple video that explains pad drum machines? I'm missing something somewhere. So, a lot of drum machines when they were initially created had drum pads on them. So you didn't have an actual drum to hit, so you'd use your fingers and you would hit the particular pads. So if we come over here to an LM7, you could come right over here and, and this is kind of, and some people could, go crazy with, velocity, sensitivity, depending on samples. But, as you kind of worked with it here, so these were just so that you could use your fingers to play the different drum sounds. And some people I've seen, there's just one guy who used to be on the kind of NAMM show circuit for a while that could play amazingly using like Elisa's HR16 drum machines. Whatever he did would never translate to any other drum machine, but he was like, Jimi Hendrix on a HR-16 and how he could manipulate those pads, and he would wear them out like, they would last like a year for him, but he would just wear the pads out. But this guy was so nuanced at being able to play. So the software is mimicking kind of those finger pads that you would see, so that when you come here, you could just trigger it from MIDI, which a lot of people do. Some people, really love the feel of pads. If you look at, when I used to work at studios years and decades ago, you could always see like the MPC 60 was a sampling workstation of choice, and you'd always see like the bottom left pad would always be completely worn out compared to all of the other pads. So we're just trying to maintain that same paradigm in software. Mark Raven says, that's awesome facts about Channel 10. Only here do we learn these things. That's real value. That's real knowledge. That's nuts and so cool. Thanks. That was a big thing of which company would get the gaming standard at the time, because it was Microsoft and Apple both wanting to release it as part of their gaming systems, because they couldn't play digital audio in a game. There wasn't enough bandwidth for it, so they would do MIDI. So hence General MIDI started really from the gaming world. Val says, always wondered about the Channel 10 thing. Never used it, but heard it. Adam Langford said he had a card version of the MT32. Brandon Sills just says, rolling JV1010, MT32, SC55, Yamaha MU80. So I still have a Yamaha MU80 on top of my rack. I haven't turned it on in years, but yeah, it was a great sounding box. And the MU80 was good because it had an audio input, so I used to use it for demos because I could take the audio, route it into the MU80, have MIDI, and go out just one stereo out to speakers when I traveled. Mark Raven just takes does he wish he had his second keyboard with one key, a Windows key. I wonder if I know like Microsoft Power Toys has some different functions to remap keys, like if you wanted to switch the physical like Alt and Control keys. So there might be a Power Toys utility that might help you out, Mark. Yeah, we see Adam Langford just mentioned Power Tools. I think it's Power Toys. Guys, detail has a Roland R5 electronic drum machine. Yeah, the R8 was like so highly regarded in a day, and doesn't still have that legacy impact of other drum machines. As it has Yamaha TX16W and a Kawai K1. Kawai K1-2 was my first synth. Poor man's D50 at the time. Gerald Ely says he'll use the VB1 to add definition to other bass VSTs. John Barry says make a donation. It's a great K1M installation. Check it out. That plug-in periodically. Donate for it. All right, so we see from Alex, says, hi, Greg. Let's say I've loaded a piano, then in Media Bay, when I go to do instrument, it stays stuck on the new instrument, and I can't turn it off. All right, so it could depend on the instrument, but let's say if I am here, I go to, let's say if I come over here to my instruments, I will load up, let's say, Retrolog. Right, so I could come over here, out my filters, right? So I could audition my sounds here. All right, so let's go ahead and double click. And now when I come over here, we could have this retro log sound. And now when I'm over here, and then I think if I just drag it over, I could have the new sound. So let's say. So I have that Selena sound. So if I just even drag that over, now I can update it. So you just do it like that as well. So, but let me know like what instrument. Some instruments may support the media bay like that, and others don't. So. The ice cream truck going by my neighborhood outside. Amazing. My son had never heard of an ice cream truck, but he heard that bell and he knew it had ice cream somehow. Song playing. Reading through comments. All right, so we see from John Barry, says, can I only have inversions on the first chord of the chord track? I would like to do 3 chords and then change the inversions every 4 bars, for example. Okay, so let's come over here to our chord track. Okay, so let's say I have a E, and an E chord. All right. Okay, so I only have inversions on the first chord. On the chord track, I would like to do 3 chords and then change versions every 4 bars. All right, so let's say I have this as an A over E. Right? I want to duplicate this times so let's say I want this to be an A, and I want this to be a D with an F sharp. And let's make this our E. And we'll do this with a E in the bass. Do an A over E. A, E, 7th over B. Right, so see, would like to do 3 chords and then change the inversions every 4 bars, for example. So let me know if that is kind of what you want to do, but it doesn't have to be, the inversion doesn't have to be just on the first chord. It could be on any chord, as you can see here. If you wanted variations on that, see that. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding you, John. All right, so you see John Barry says he still uses MPC Groove quantized presets. So we see Mark Rabin's going to check out the Power Toys. All right, so we see Soren just asked, Greg, can you show me how to get guitar tablature from a MIDI? Okay, so let me just get a guitar part that makes sense here. Okay, so we see that we'll call this guitar. All right, so generally when we look at tablature, we come over here. Okay, so we see that we're going to have our regular music here. So if we want to convert this to tablature, I think if we go to settings, to instrument, and then we will say strings and tuning, our presentation, we'll say tablature only. There are the rhythms. And now we could just see your guitar tab indicated right here. So again, so open it in the score editor. You click on settings here. And then the instrument settings, you could also access those from the score menu, your instrument settings. And if you have like the track name guitar, it will kind of have this up. Okay, we're going to use a classical guitar. We want to, you'd have alternate guitar tunings as well, but we could just, or like ukulele tunings, and then you could choose to have tablature and show the rhythms. It also determine the number of frets and your tunings here manually if needed. So as we come over, again, we'll just say instrument, say just tablature. Okay, so check that out, Soren. Okay. Rabin just asking a great question. What do you value knowledge at? All right, see kind words from Adam Langford, thank you. All right, so we see for some reason my preview is not working at this section. So if your preview isn't working, so I'm not sure if it's like the synth preview. So let's say if I come over here and I just go to my VST instruments. And now when I come over here, so check to make sure it, may take a second for a great sound, beauty, bad, major. You have to remember that. It's like a whole song, one note. But you can now, so make sure one, because this will be routed since it isn't assigned to a track, it's probably going to be routed through the control room. So go to like your audio connections setup and make sure that the control room, I just add a monitor, and then this is where I do my outputs here. So that at this point, it has somewhere to route the audio through. So let me know if that's the... if that's the preview that you're referring to. Adam Langford just says, you have to tell the children that they only play music when the ice cream is run out. That's good. Something I probably would have done younger with my son. All right, so we see from Raw Justice Hip Hop. Hey, Greg, did you ever record at Q Recording Studios in Falls Church? I recorded there in the early 90s with the engineers Bill Appleberry. Around the time Shy recorded If I Ever Fall in Love. I think I was in there once or twice to go for some meetings and stuff. I'd never recorded there. I did some sessions at Bias in Springfield. I also did some sessions at Omega in Rockville. And then I did a lot of work at a studio in Norfolk, Virginia called Mid-Ease. And he did like the Marky Mark hit record. It was like a $25 an hour studio. And he did like Good Vibrations for Marky Mark. Made the guy pay cash up front because he didn't think he was good for the money. So, but I haven't spent a lot of time in Q. So they're still open. All right, so we see Steve Green asks, Greg, when I copy a small section of an audio event to a new track, I double click the new copied section in the lower zone. All notes are showing from the complete audio event, not just the copied notes. All right, so it could be, let's come over here. Let's say if I have a drum loop here. So let's say I have an audio file. All right, so let's say I copy it. So let's say I have my file here. But let's say this file, I'm not sure how it could depend on how you're copying it as well. So let's say this file is truncated a little bit. Okay. So if I copy this event, let's see if I copy and I come here and I want to paste event. Let me put it on, select this track. Great. So if the file was originally truncated, let me just go. You could be copying the whole, like you're copying a portion of the file, but the full file is there because, so we can see that, as we come over here, that this file will still kind of exist. Like if we extend this out, so you may be copying a portion of the file over, but it's still referencing the full audio file. So when you copy it over, you may see, parts before and parts after. So again, if I just come here, because it's still referencing the same file. So let's say I have, this is 12 measures. I copy this. I go down to this track and paste it. we're copying the whole audio file, but what we're doing is saying this audio file is starting here and ending here. We could choose to, filter out those particular views if you want to. So we could say, think if the show maybe so, but that's kind of why, because this file may have been truncated and all that audio content is still there. So this way you could just simply roll back to expose the other audio events. So you're copying the whole audio file, but you're just saying we're only seeing a limited scope of the audio file if it was kind of edited and truncated at all. Okay, so we see from John Barry, says, sorry, Greg, I meant from the info line. Maybe this with the chord pads. Okay, so this, if you're changing, I'm not sure if you're doing the voicings here. So this is really kind of intended to be just I think it's intended for kind of like global voicings, like when we are sending it out. So let me just take a listen to it here. So let's say solo this here. Thanks for the clarification, John. Sorry for misunderstanding that. All right, so let's say, and I want to do my second inversion. So I think that this is global, so that all of the tracks here will, so let's say if I switch this all to my, we'll say first inversion. And let's just go to our root. So I think the intention of this is, to be kind of the global voicings as opposed to the individual voicings. And you could come over here. So let's say if I want to take this chord track here, see if then you could do the individual chords here, but I think that, the voicing here is kind of like the preview voicing. So like as you're kind of like trying out ideas for the chords, that you could just change the kind of the global voicing for like the preview channel, and then you could overwrite it individually for the chords. Sorry for misunderstanding, John. Guys, do you sharing a link to free MPC Groove templates? We see Soren just says, thanks, Greg. Tablature noted. Gerald Ely says he doesn't use it, but the tablature capabilities are cool. Great. Soren says tomorrow he will have a recording session, vocals and bass done by friends of mine at my place. Am I correct soon? It's smart to record one at a time or together. if you could record together, it depends on the performance, whatever works for people, So, if you were recording vocals and you have a bass amp at your place, it's probably, and you don't have like a way to isolate the sound, it's probably bad. If you're just going direct with the bass and you could point the mic away so that, for the vocalist, so that they're not hearing the fingers on the bass going, depending on your microphone and your mic setup. Like I remember doing many sessions with like an electronic drum set, but real cymbals. And, we would get on the cymbals, the hi-hat, we would still get the drummer hitting the pad that was triggering the MIDI information to play samples, but it was still, we had to deal with it because it was leaking through. So if their performance, some people will sing better and perform better when they're playing at the same time. Some people that may kind of wig them out. So you could try doing it once, and if it's not working, just, break it apart. That's what I would recommend. But if it's people that play music all the time together and they're very comfortable, they may have that unspoken musician communication, a little look here, someone reacts to how someone interprets a note, how someone slides up, how someone, sings a part, they may play differently. Those types of things, if they're going to react off of each other, capturing that together would make sense. All right, so we see Gareth's got to go. Thanks for joining us today. Great to have you on. Great, so we have Jenny Elson joining us from Denmark. Using Cubase 13 Pro. Thanks for being on the line and part of the community today. Raja says hip hop. There's a couple guys who graduated from Omega boarding school there. All right, Nanak Nandy or Nandy, Greg, if time allows, please show some tips on quantizing audio files. Okay. All right, so let's say we come over here, we have so quantizing is going to be often very similar to audio. It could be very similar to quantizing MIDI. So let's say take this guitar part here, and let's just go to our quantize panel. And when we do audio quantizing, we just want our audio warp quantized. So we look at it, and we undo our quantizing, see how this is shifted. Phrase right there, so we redo. Now sometimes you may still want to kind of move some stuff around, and that's when we could utilize free warping. So I'm going to kind of switch to my free warp tool, and we can do this across multiple tracks if you want to do drums, or if you want it to do it on a single track on a project window. When you zoom in, we see that we have warp markers. So Cubase will automatically create hit points like while it's recording. So we're going to now come over here, and we could go to your audio menu, go to real-time processing, and we could say create warp markers from hit points. So And once we do that, we see these yellow lines. So let's say I want to just move some of the rhythmic elements here. So let's say I want that note here, maybe I want this note to be not on the beat, but on a downbeat. So when you kind of hover to the right, you'll see that this vertical line goes from yellow to white. And what I can do now is I'm just going to come right over here and say, okay, let's just see what this sounds like. And I can move that one element of the audio. And let's say I want this to fall on the beat here. So I could and we could have that kind of snap. So let's say I want this to be right on the downbeat. Or if I say, okay, I want this to be closer to be over here. So let's move this. So now, so say, okay, maybe that's rushing. I want that on the downbeat. And as you work with this, we could just be able to do stuff as well. But you could just globally kind of select an event and open up your quantize panel. And then just make sure that you have audio warp quantize enabled there. So Gerald Ely just says, Greg, was that granular guitars for a pad shop that you're using earlier? So I think it was just a built-in when I went to pad shop. I'll just check again. I don't think it was granular guitars, which I think is an amazing library. But if we go, let's say we just pop over to my media, let's go to our VST instruments, and we'll scroll down to pad shop. So I think I just did, let's see if that one was big. That's in granular guitars. Let's see if I just come over to. So I'm not sure. I could go back and rewind and look for the preset. It might have been. Bed major. That was it, but it might have been granular guitars. So it was that preset, the beauty bed major. I can't remember, something with the B. But if that was the one, let me just see. Might have been that one might have been in granular guitars. If that was the big or the beautiful beauty bed major, if that was a preset I used earlier, that is in granular guitars. So it could be on sale this week. John Barry says, sorry again, Greg. I should have said voicings. No worries. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, and we see John just says that clarifies that I can still change the voicings here and drag chords to part and then change the voicings. Right, Sable Winters says she upgraded Spec Layers 12 Pro to 13. What instruments should I consider for Hallian? I'm if you're looking for stuff that's on the sale, um, I'll take a quick look at what's on sale currently. That's it. If you're looking for like acoustic guitar stuff, there's lots of great stuff with like the T guitar is pretty wonderful. If you want to have all sorts of rhythm acoustic guitar like backing parts. Etude is always a great piano. Can't go wrong with Etude. Let's see. Rasta is pretty amazing. Simple is a great synthesizer as well. That's kind of a no-brainer deal for me at $30. Hand Drum 2 is quite interesting, so someone was waiting for that to go on sale. Danny Luck stuff is great. Wonderful composer. And a lot of these have also been kind of released for mobile and iOS. So there's some ones to check out. So listen to some of the different, but if you let me know, it's like, oh, I'm looking for a bass, I'm looking for a particular types of instruments, then I might be able to help you a little bit. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to save your preferences, preset files, and load them in a newly installed Cubase? I only see save, rename, and delete button and no load. I'm confused. So if you go to in the edit menu, you can go to your profile manager, and all you have to do is export your profile and put it on. It's going to a separate computer. So newly installed Cubase will automatically look for your preferences and migrate them. But it's always good to have your profile, and this can be your preferences, your key commands, a lot of user presets, your track presets. Those can all be stored collectively in a profile. And then you could take that to another machine very easily and import the profile. And then you could just restart, and then you'll be all set. But if you're going from like 14 to 15, your preferences are all migrated over for you. Okay, so we see Gerald Ely says, was Beauty Bad Major? Says, cool, I'm buying. That's great. So we see Granular Guitars is going on sale. You say, I hold off. So I don't think I said it might be on sale with the current promotion, but I don't think I saw it in the current promotion, but it's a great library, so you'll like it. All right, so we see Greg, can you do a demo converting audio track to MIDI to instrument? Thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll take like this bass part here. So let's say I'll just take this. Okay, so let's load up an instrument here. We'll do the VB1. Fine. Okay, so I want to take this bass part. We'll go into our very audio. And we'll see under our choose functions, extract MIDI. I have my VB1 track selected here, so we'll export it to the first selected track. We'll hit OK. Now, if I did everything right, we should have our MIDI part here. And I'll have this not follow the chord track. So again, just come into Very Audio, and then from the functions, this will work for a monophonic source. You could just say extract MIDI, and then come right over here, go to your bass, notation. We could just come right over. Okay, so we see Sable. It says it has T guitar, backbone, looking at the world bundle to make things more interesting. Yeah, also check out some of those like vocal phrases. There's like ethnic vocal phrases, and those are like really great atmospheric, like right movie score for like the Middle East, stuff like that. It's really good. All right, let me jump to some other questions that were mailed in. Okay, so the first question we have was how to get two separate channels to be in sync for recording, like two mono tracks on different mics for an acoustic guitar. Okay. All right, so let's say if I have, say, two tracks, and these are going to be mono sources. So we'll say I want this to be my room mic guitar, let's say acoustic guitar, let's say 12th fret. And I want to add a track for, let's say, the acoustic guitar DI. All right, but I don't want to always have to come over here, record, enable, monitor, enable for each of those. I want to kind of treat them as one single entity. So if I go into my mixer, I could take these three guitar tracks, I'll hold down my shift key, and then we're going to link them. So when we come over here, we could give it a name if we wanted to. We could choose to link the volume or sends or inserts. So let's just say, but I want to link their selection, maybe their routing, and the record, enable, and monitor. So now as soon as I'm here, I could select one of the tracks, and when I come over, now all of the tracks will be kind of record enabled. So let's just come over again, say unlink. So we would just choose to link our tracks. Now, as we do this, and just when one goes into record, they'll all go into record. Okay. Here's another question that was mailed in. How to turn MIDI CCs that live in the automation track and migrate them to CC data within the MIDI event. All right, so let's say I come over here. I have an instrument track. Great, so let's say I have some notes in my part here. All right, and let's say I have chosen to written my information as CC data as automation. So let's say when I come over here, like let's say I have modulation data. So at this point, I want to take this modulation data. And when I go into the part, there's no MIDI CC automation. I will take a look. Let's open the MIDI part in the list editor. So we go to our list editor. I just see note information. So I want this MIDI CC to be migrated back into the part. Often we take the MIDI CC information that's in the part in the event and we migrate it out of the event to automation. So we could use familiar automation editing paradigms. But if we want to get the automation back in, I'm going to hit the letter P and we'll go to MIDI and we'll say merge MIDI in loop. I'm going to go ahead and check these different elements. Now, when I come back over here, if I needed to export this as a MIDI file, when we go into our list editor, we can just say, now I can see my CC1 data plus the notes all embedded over. So hit the P button to set the left and right locators, go to your MIDI menu, and from there choose merge MIDI in loop. Then all of that automation is now embedded directly in the part. Okay. Next question. Dear Greg, whenever I work on drum MIDI and open it up in the full screen editor, I don't find a way to set it to drum. It stays in piano roll mode. In the bottom area on the screen, I can set the editor to drums, but when I work on a different event and come back to the MIDI event, it turns back to piano roll. Is there a way to set the track that contains MIDI events permanently to show the drum editor? All right, so let's say I have this. I'll just add a quick groove agent. Okay, so when I come over here, I'm just going to drag pattern here. Okay, so we have drums. So when we double click the events, they will go into the piano roll editor. So we have our piano roll editor here. I think that you could just come directly here and choose to switch to the drum editor, and we could see it in the drum editor from the MIDI menu. Now, one of the clever things is if we assign this to a drum, if there's a drum map assigned to it, and it doesn't really have to be a drum map of anything, even if you just choose GM map, or I could, if you're using Groove Agent or LM7, you could just say create the drum map from the instrument, and there's a preference. So let's go to your preferences or settings, and I think it might be under editors. You'll see use drum editor when drum map is assigned. That's the default behavior. So now when you double click on a MIDI track that is routed to a drum map, you can just simply, that will automatically go into a dedicated drum editor by default. So you don't have to always toggle back and forth between the key editor and the drum editor. Assign it to a drum map. Even if you used a GM map, just anything, you can make a blank map. As long as it's assigned to a drum map, when you double click on the drums, then it's going to open up in the drum editor for you. Wait, let me jump back. See, we've got a couple more minutes left. Okay. John Barry just says he's made a couple of tracks with the Hayat Salim vocal phrases, amazing voice. John Barry just says the Elm 7 has a drum map too. I believe so. I'll just check just to make sure. Yep. Yeah. There. All right. So we see from Raw Justice Hip Hop says, thanks, Greg. You keep teaching me new things, keep learning new things. So it's always great to share knowledge. Abel says, sorry, I haven't been as engaging lately. I'm finding out that I'm only one person these days. We're just happy to have you on, Sable. All right, so it looks like we are at the end of questions. We'll see if there's other questions that pop in. We have a couple minutes left. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I hope that everyone has learned new tips and tricks so that you could use your Cubase smarter, faster, better, make some wonderful music, be creative. A couple seconds, see if there's other questions that pop in. If not, we will wrap up just about 3 or 4 minutes early. So we see Val checking out, heading off. Thanks for joining us today. About 20 seconds from when I talk. All right, so we see just a question from Sable, says audio to MIDI to instrument tracking. So I just showed it with the bass. It doesn't do it in real time, but you could convert like a monophonic source like the bass. We just went over that just a couple minutes ago. And then convert that to MIDI. You extract the MIDI. Gerald Ely says, thanks, Greg. Thanks again, Greg. Lots to rewatch. All right, give it another 30 seconds and then we'll wrap. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. Thanks again for all the great questions. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And if you want to send questions in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please be safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.